Hey everyone, and welcome to another Ready Your Future podcast. I'm here with my good friends Mick Roland, who is a author, blogger. Now he's a podcaster. He's putting his books online for people to listen to. He's doing a great job over there. You can find him at mick-roland.com or mick-roland.com. And also with Brian Hawkins, who runs nextstepsurvival.com. He's a blogger, YouTuber, doing a lot of great stuff out there in the preparedness community. And so we've been doing this for a while. We haven't done it in a while. It's been a little bit, but we've done several of these, and I really enjoy them. So I'm glad that we're going to be able to connect. On this one, we're talking about disaster, food, and homesteading. And so before we jump into that, I wanted to just ask Mick and Brian, what are you guys up to? I'll start with you, Mick. What have you been up to since our last episode?
Well, like you said, continuing to do podcasts of the audiobooks and getting those online. I committed to doing one a week, so that's kind of been keeping me busy between the recording and the editing. And more recently, I've been having all my time consumed with processing a half a pig, trying to get it cut up and in the freezer or salted for bacons and hams. So finally passed all that. So yay.
A half a pig. Was that a lot of meat for you? I mean, I guess it's, relative to the size of the pig. But what did you come up with?
It was a pretty much market weight pig when he had processed it. I think it would have been half a pig was 125 pounds before we were cutting it up. And there's a lot.
That's a lot, man. All right.
And, there's a lot of fat on a pig. I ended up with, 7 or 8 pints of lard after I got done rendering it down. So tried to use everything. I let the pastor have the feet. I didn't want the feet.
That's awesome. So when we get to the food part of this, I want you to, if you'll talk a little bit more about that, and then just all was involved and how you said you're pastor, and so I know the story, but if you could share it with the rest of the listeners, the viewers, I think that would be great.
Sure.
All right. So Brian, what have you been up to since we last did a podcast?
Yeah, it's been a little bit. I live in Michigan here, so I had a lot of outside stuff trying to get the wrap up garden and the shrubs and the perennials and all that kind of stuff, and trying to get it ready for the cold winter if we have that, global warming and all that stuff. But I got into freeze drying, so that's keeping me pretty busy, trying to keep that going as often as possible. I usually get like 3 cycles a week on that. So it's like a new or a new branch or something. So it's starting to look good. I do a lot of it in quart jars just for the looks of it, but mostly in my bags. And I moved into a new office here. So I've got 3 bedrooms, and I'm just doing a little at a time and moving my pantry into its own separate space and my office into another space. And as you can see, it's the typical office for like an executive where they keep all their gear and stuff. So all of that's been keeping me pretty busy though for quite a while.
All right. Well, I think too, again, when we get to the food part, if you'll talk a little bit about that freeze drying, I think people will want to know a little bit more about it and the process and what all goes into it, even if you think it's worth it or not.
Sure.
All right. So as we get into this topic, right, disaster food and homesteading, there's a lot of craziness in the world right now. It's like you almost can't keep up with it. And so everybody has their things that they're looking at. I thought I would just kind of ask, we could all kind of talk a little bit about what things are you paying attention to and why, as you go about your life. And, the world's always ending. I always say that, right? The world is always ending. I remember that one line from Men in Black. And so in the preparedness community, we always see it's like one thing after another. And when nothing comes about, like the next thing is, we get mad at the media for doing that, but the preparedness community does that too, right? Is there's always the next big event, the next big disaster coming. So with that said, I want to give us a little bit of time to talk about what are we paying attention to, what things are interesting to you and why. And Mick, I'll just kick it to you and let you take it from here.
Well, I guess, like you say, after the last disaster that didn't happen, I mean, we were supposed to have run out of food last fall, I think, weren't we?
Yeah.
And that kind of didn't happen. I'm all happy for that, but it didn't happen. So what I have been keeping my eye on, though, is the potential rollout of digital currency and all of the big brother controls that come along with that. That, it's always going to be for our own good, and it'll be so that the terrorists and the drug cartels don't have money. I mean, there's always a good reason, but it still will amount to putting all of our money in someone else's pocket and then asking them pretty please if we can have some. What could possibly go wrong there? So I've been kind of keeping an eye on that, the digital things. There were a few posts on that even just this morning, I think, on the exclusive email group, talking about once there's digital currency, then they can just decline you for whatever reason and the rules will change. And so that, I'm going to keep an eye on that a little bit, with the idea of being not as exposed financially as I can be. Not necessarily to the point of hoarding silver and gold, because that's been debated on the email group as well, but trying not to be totally dependent on banking. So a lot of that's just preparedness. If you've got your food, you got your water, you got your other supplies, hammers, as Jeff would say, that then if they need to shut down the monetary supply for a couple of months in order to turn it into digibucks or whatever it's going to be, I won't be hamstrung. So that's what I've been keeping an eye on.
That's interesting. I was talking to one of my coworkers, and we're talking about, I guess, a new place in Houston that I didn't realize was there. I kind of live in my own, in the suburbs and kind of stay out. But she was, in talking about what you could do there. It was just kind of like a venue, and you can go and look around, and they had food and all that kind of stuff. Everything that you bought had to be, they didn't take cash and they didn't take credit cards. It all had to be like on your phone. And she was a little bit more old school. So she was like, I had to learn how to do that. There was a little bit of a learning curve, but once I learned, it was like, we were okay. And, a lot of people don't look at it as that scary piece, using your phone for, to pay, Apple Pay, Google Pay, whatever pay is out there, the digital currency that's there. So it seems like it's coming faster and faster. Just people don't realize it unless you are one of us, quote unquote conspiracy theorists, or people that are always watching out there what's happening. So interesting, a lot of things out there. Brian, what about you? Let's kick it to you.
Well, I just started a blog post that I need to finish about getting off of PayPal, and why you should, or why I did. And one of the three reasons that I chose to get, and by the way, I've been on there since, I don't know, like for a very long time, probably soon after PayPal started, and all these automatic payments, going to Netflix and the hosting, and all, it was difficult to find options, because not everybody has other solutions if you're trying to avoid putting your credit card number into their system so it can later get hacked and all that. So it was a little bit of a process. But one of the three reasons was this new, and I believe it's part of the Biden administration, but where they have anything over $600 in a year has to be reported as income. So if I give you, if I send you $600 for, to pay my part of our whatever, our land contract or whatever we got going, the anything over that 600 has to be reported, not just by us, but by the financial institutions themselves, right? So I think I didn't get rid of PayPal because I think that it's another option. So up to $600 per person for that, and then the other ones, all the other things that I don't have Facebook anymore, but the Facebook can use and all of those others. And I think that's just one way to try to stay under the wire, under the radar. But the threshold is dropped so low, and that's just another way that I think they're coming at us as far as the 100% taxes with the digital dollar or whatever it's going to be called coming at us, so that you can't spend a dime without paying your fair share of taxes. So that's pretty much what I was talking about on that post.
One of the things I've been thinking about, because a lot of people in the email group were didn't want to use PayPal, and people were canceling they weren't canceling the email group, but they were canceling future payments in PayPal. So I did move over to Stripe, which is, you can just use your credit card and you're good there. But I remember back in the day when I was listening to Dave Ramsey and, trying to get out of debt and, all that stuff. And really, you only have to listen to Dave Ramsey for 1 month, because it's all the same after that. It's all the, same, get rid of your new car and pay down debt and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, they talked about having, the debit cards, and even if you needed a credit card, something like with a Visa on it or whatever, that you can get one of those reloadable gift cards. And I wonder how that will play out in the future. People who have like right now, I have a couple of gift cards with the Visa logo on there that has money on there, not a lot, but $25, $30 things that people have given me. And you can reload those if you registered or whatever. You can reload those and use those. And so it's not really tied to your bank account if it gets hacked, but you can use it like a regular Visa card. So something maybe that's a blog post for you, Brian, that you can write there in the future, or maybe add it to your PayPal as an option.
I'm on it.
So some of the things that I was looking at, I went to the grocery store this morning, and I noticed that gas in where I normally get gas was $2.49. And that was a 10-cent drop from just, I think, Thursday when I filled up, or Wednesday when I filled up. So 3 days ago. And that's pretty crazy how fast that is going down. And I know that I've seen it online. I don't know exactly where, but they're talking about, gas is now lower than it was a year ago in a lot of different places. The question is why. I mean, people are going to say, well, the economy is good and the economy is better. Is it that, or is it because people aren't driving, as much anymore, or because it hurts to drive, it hurts to put that money in, or they're having that financial crunch. So that's one of those things that kind of pay attention, although employment numbers are good and, you're hearing the inflation is not that bad, but I don't know. I've gotten to the point where I don't trust all that stuff. I haven't trusted it for a while, but that's one of those things. Is like, yeah, whatever. That's just propaganda. I think I'll talk. Yeah. So anyway, I'll talk about that here in just a second. The other thing that I'm really paying attention to is just an uptick in crime. So I live in Houston, one of the third largest cities in Texas, and I believe it's the third largest. Maybe it's the second largest now. Just a lot of people, and sort of places that are where that I'm familiar with, where there's a lot of crime going on, and even it reaches out into the suburbs. And so sometimes in the past, it would be like things happen in the city, and those types of things. But I think we're hearing about it a little bit more. So just paying attention to it. I know that we've shared that even in our online meetup with the email group. And talked about, actually, no. So I'm confusing the emo group and then Bible study, I think. So the Bible study, we talked about that, just about crime and what we're seeing. And I know that in the past, people would say, well, you're just hearing more, you have more avenues to hear about it. You have social media, you have all these different ways that you can hear about it. In the past, it would just be the 10 o'clock news. And well, that it's just that's not true, right? I mean, there is an uptick in crime, and if people were really paying attention, maybe not in your area, but I know that in my area, that's something that I'm paying attention to. Another thing that's been pretty big, it was in the news for a while, is the water in Houston was shut down. There was a water treatment plant in South Houston that kind of affected all of Houston, and so they lost power and pressure went down too low to where the water that was coming out, they weren't able to okay it and say that it was safe to drink. That went on for about 3 or 4 days. It turned out that it was safe to drink and there really wasn't a big problem, but people were panicked. And the thing is, we always talk about this. Was that enough to get people? I mean, people, schools were closed down. People were probably not going to work, not taking showers and different, all that kind of stuff. Boiling water, even the boiling water, they were said not to do that there for a little while. Grocery stores were running out of water. So what is that going to be enough to get people to say, hey, I need to store some water here at home? I doubt it, right? Because it's just like a little blip to them, and like they got over it and things were fixed. So not only that, but the infrastructure, not only here in Houston or Texas, but in all the United States. That's one of my concerns. Recently in the news, we've heard about electrical plants being targeted and being shot at. And so that's it. And then so it was one big one that we were hearing about. And then as people started digging into it, they're hearing more. I mean, it's like it's happening on a regular basis. You're just not hearing about it. So that's kind of concerning to me. Makes me want to make sure that I have whatever I need to be able to power what I need to do to get through. I don't want to lose all the meat in my freezer. I'm sure Mick doesn't want to lose all the pig, the half of the pig that he just got through processing, right? And so that's one of those things that is important to me. And I've been looking at prices, going to the grocery store again. I mean, that's just fresh, a couple of hours ago, going to the grocery store and paying, bukus of money for just a little bit of groceries. And I'm sure people are feeling that. I'm blessed to where I can handle that, the uptick in prices, but there's a lot of people that can't. And so you feel for those people, and you just wonder where it goes, how much more it goes up, and what that does to everyone that's out there, that people that are living paycheck to paycheck. And then I said that I would kind of mention this is just the trust in leaders. I was having a conversation with another, like a coworker, and that kind of came up. It's like, it's hard to trust the media. It's hard to trust politicians. It's hard to trust the people that are in leadership that are giving you information. When you get to that point where you're not trusting people, what does that do for society? And then what does that do for everyone? And so that is just works on the psyche of everyone. And you get to the point where you start turning in, and you don't want to believe in anybody or anything that's going on out there. I think that's a pretty sad place to be in. So the state of things, guys, did that trigger anything for y'all? Was there anything that kind of came up as I was talking, or Mick, anything after Brian was sharing?
Well, actually, I was going to ask you about the uptick in crime. What kind of crime are you hearing more of?
There's like people shooting, like people like guns and stuff like that, that kind of thing. People breaking in, but the gun violence, hearing a lot more of people getting upset and people taking out guns and shooting each other, those different kinds of things that you hear about. One of the things that I know I shared this in the email group was the new app, or it was new to me, ground.news. Brian, I think you got into that one as well. So I look at it more as on the international level, but I also have a local feed, and I can see what's happening, in the Houston area. And it's they give you all the different, big news outlets, whether it's like the television stations or the newspapers, or, even the small local newspapers, they will link into them. And you just see a lot of crime like that, gun violence and domestic violence and people just like losing their mind type stuff that you normally wouldn't hear.
So I guess the question is, after you've heard what kind of crime there is, how do you plan for it? What do you do?
Well, of course, I mean, situational awareness is one of those big things for me. It's been a while where I don't let my wife go out at night, anymore. It's either I'm sending one of my kids who are like, they're bigger than me, like Amazon, they eat a bunch of GMO food, I guess. And so they go out. And so at least someone is with her. And then if they don't go, I go, or she doesn't wind up going. Keeping your head on, we talk about that, on the swivel all the time, and just making sure you're out there. A lot of the things happen at night, I mean, not all of it, but some of it. And so just being careful. You can't stop living life, but being careful about what's going on out there.
I wanted to touch on a couple of things that you mentioned in the last segment there, Todd. So with the water situation, yours turned out to, if you can believe them, that it may have been a false alarm. The problem, we just had that here in Michigan a couple of years ago with the Flint, Michigan, with the lead in the water. We don't know how long that went before anybody was even notified. In fact, they were intentionally hiding it for at least months, probably years. But so that kind of falls in with the whole, both the trust in our leadership and the water supply issues. So I think as soon as somebody can, I don't know if what will get lead out of water, but some of the other things, maybe start using filtered water in your own home on a regular basis, and then prep on whatever filters. I know that there's some controversy right now with the Berkey and some of the testing and stuff, and I know it's very expensive, but I forgot. I think it was Hydro Blue that I ended up buying a couple of those on your recommendation. Maybe you want to put a link or something in the notes for that. You can actually use 5-gallon pails for a Berkey type setup. So I thought that was good.
I bought that kit too.
Yeah, I bought 2 of them, and then and also like that little Hydro Blue water bottle, and I think maybe something else. But yeah, so I just thought I'd throw that in, because by the time we hear about that in the news, we may have been drinking that for months, or even longer. So I thought I'd just bring that up.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right on that. The city officials, whatever, the kind of county officials, don't want to scare everyone and cause panic, because they know what people will wind up doing. We were very lucky because we don't have city water. We're in a mud district, and so our water was safe. It was funny because the mud district they don't have a very up-to-date website, but I'm sure they got hit so much that eventually they were like, our water is safe. Your water is safe to drink. You don't have to call. We're good. Don't call the emergency line or whatever. So it's like, yeah, I mean, that's what people want to know, that they're drinking safe water. And so that's one of those things that it's a good investment in there. Right. So, all right. Well, we can jump from water to food. Another important thing, Mick made the mention of so many people were talking about that, come fall, come winter, that we were going to be crazy, starving, and, all the different things that we're hearing out there. So I wanted to talk a little bit about food concerns and then food production and what we're doing, and kind of go from there. So Brian, do you want to kick us off here? Where are you at with all that?
Okay, so my pantry, I feel pretty good about that. For my wife and I have, or is it my wife and me? I'm not good. I'm just a blogger. But the we can go far beyond a year at this point for just the 2 of us. The problem is, if something happens, we're going to have all of our family in the area they all know what we do here, so they're all going to be at our doorstep. And I'm not the guy that's going to be standing there pointing a gun at my own family. I think that's just ridiculous. So, but that event, depending on the situation, that can run out pretty quick, especially if you're prepping for 2 people and you got 15 or 20 in your house. Like I said, depending on how bad the situation is. The gardening, in my experience, everybody talks about the gardening, and I think that's very important, but it's also important what you garden. So what I have in my garden most summers wouldn't sustain anybody for any time at all. It's, peppers and tomatoes and lettuce and cucumbers. You're not going to live off of that. It's a nice supplement, and it's nice to have some healthy food and to be able to store some of your own food and stuff. But it's really not a survival garden in my case. I don't even know how you do a survival garden. So I like what Mick's doing with the chickens. I live in an area where I'm on a little 1/4 acre lot out, on a gravel road outside of town, but I'm 2 houses from the boundary where I'm allowed to be considered agricultural and have livestock, and they consider 1 chicken livestock. I'm not even supposed to have the bees that I have. That's not even allowed. So I would need a privacy fence, although somebody said they seen a drone. They thought that might have been the township, but I think I need a privacy fence and some chickens. I think the meat source and the egg source, it's like you get both. If you can handle doing the chicken, I'm gonna have to go to buy mix and see if I actually have it in me to do whatever it is you need to do to a chicken to make it go into a bucket, and a fried chicken bucket, and eat. I don't know if I can do that, but but the eggs are good. And on perennials, I'm this next year, or coming up in 2023, I'm going to focus harder on perennials and fruit trees than I will on my garden. It takes sometimes years for those to establish, but I think that's very important right now. And you can do a lot of that on even your front yard. So I'm like thinking I have these dogwood bushes and these, I don't know, $1,000 plants that's lining my house. I'm going to dig all that up and replace that with whatever berries and shrubs and type of stuff that with edibles that I can get. And they look good, and why not have a resource. I just want one more thing. I have the Jerusalem artichokes lining my garden for like 8 feet. I'm amazed at how little, actually, they don't need any maintenance at all, at least where I'm at. And I want to put those up along my outside fence, inside, just so when I get the privacy fence. But those are always there under the ground, I'm assuming. Now, we did try a couple of them, and they're not that great, but we can spice those up and eat those pretty, without gagging. So survival food.
So what did you think they tasted like?
I don't know. It kind of tasted, to me, it tasted like it almost seemed like it had an acorny, not acorn.
Nutty.
Yeah, nutty, a nutty, and with the texture of like a uncooked tomato. I mean, not tomato, potato. And I don't know if we were doing it right, but I threw mine in a pot of boiling water and just like softened it up and stuff. But I never really looked at how you cook them. And it's apparently it's important when you pull them out of the ground too. So I guess the best part is in the fall when they're dying down, and that's when they start putting the energy into the thing, into the what is that? It's not a root, it's a
tuber.
So, but yeah, I pulled one up, one of the end ones, because they start moving out wide. I was just trying to keep one row, and next thing I know, that 6 or 8 inch row went to about 2.5 feet on both sides of the fence. So I'm trying to get it to where it quit spreading. and I was amazed at how many there are in there. It's just an endless supply. It's like, wow, this is a treasure trove. If you're really hungry, yeah, there's food under there. That's a nice feeling.
Well, that's yeah. I've always heard about the Jerusalem artichokes. I'm sure there's plenty of recipes out there. That's something that we look forward to hearing more about, Brian.
But they also look good, and they get really tall. So they're like, oh, maybe not 8 foot tall, but maybe maybe 8 foot tall. They're way over my head, and then they get these little flowers on top. So that's why I'm thinking they wouldn't be that horrible out in the front yard along the perimeter or something. They do die off in the wintertime, and I chop mine down to nothing. But so it wouldn't be like a permanent fence or anything like that. But they don't look bad. They look every bit as good as my dogwood, which is about the same height.
There you go.
Older,
You can replace that dogwood with a couple of apples or a couple of pears and actually get something other than just flowers.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, you'd still get the flowers, but you'd get something else.
Right. They look just as good, but you have another resource available to you. So I think that's just smart.
So how long have you lived in your current home?
15 years, I think now.
So like you think about like you start kicking yourself, right? It's like, hey, I could have planted these trees, 12 years ago, 13 years ago, and I'd be getting all different kinds of fruit right now. That's the thing about
pears and apples and all of that stuff. And the blueberries that I just did last year would already be all established. I did strawberry patch 2 years ago, and I'm still waiting for those to mature enough. I've got grapes, same thing, but I've got blackberries and raspberries from 4 years ago. And now my big thing right now is holding them back from taking over my whole backyard. So it really makes a difference. And I've got some things take years too, like asparagus. My asparagus, after I think this is the 4th year for my asparagus, and I have yet to harvest a whole bunch out of it because, out of laziness, but it's getting huge. And now I want more of those. I want like a whole bed of those because it takes several years for it to establish. But once it does, you don't have to, it keeps coming back, even in these harsh, cold winters. So far, everything keeps coming back without having to go back to the store and buying seed or starts or whatever.
Sounds good. Mick, let's kick it to you. What do you have with the food concerns or production?
Well, as you know, I've gotten into gardening quite a bit. It's not like I've got 100 acres of garden, so I'm not going to be self-sufficient. Kind of like Brian said, you're not just going to be able to live off that garden. It's not that big of an operation, but I kind of got a little more serious about it. I don't know, like 20 years ago, my wife was the one that did the garden, and I would help now and then, but it was her garden. But then when I started realizing that, we've got our food stored for a while, but that's okay. But eventually it runs out. So that, I think I need to start figuring out how to make more as opposed to just buy more and store more. So got more into gardening. But like I say, I view it as more supplemental than it is self-sufficient. I mean, self-sufficient would be nice, but it takes a lot more space and a lot more time. But supplemental, I mean, almost anybody can do supplemental gardening. I mean, Brian, you were already mentioning you had berry bushes that, they're going to make berries every year. Raspberries and blackberries, they'll keep making them as long as you let them. And yes, they are quite invasive. They want to take over your whole yard. But, anything that you can be growing on your own and either eating or canning is something you didn't have to get from a store. So if store supplies get sketchy, you're not, up a creek without a paddle. You've got something. And it's not you don't want to boil it down to just being a pure economic equation, because you'll never compete with Walmart for cheap food. But cheap food from Walmart is okay as long as Walmart's got the food. But if they don't got the food, well, then it doesn't matter how cheap it used to be. So I got more into the gardening and looked at it as a learning curve, because unlike Mr. Bloomberg, who thinks it's just a matter of put seeds in the dirt and you got food, that if you've done any amount of gardening, you know that some stuff really fails miserably and some stuff does surprisingly well, and it's not usually the thing you wanted that did surprisingly well. But yeah, you touched on some of that, Brian, about survival garden can't just be mint and dill and oregano, because those are nice, but that's not going to fill a belly. So you do have to think about what you're growing and how does it fit into a diet. So for that, we did fruit trees several years ago, and now we're starting to see the well, I suppose you could say fruits of our labor, that they've been around long enough that they're starting to almost produce more than we can deal with in a harvest season, which is such a problem to have, too much food. That's starting to come online, but I went ahead and planted 3 more little apple trees out front so they can look all decorative, that are a different variety. So if I end up with a blight or a disease that wipes out my good apple trees, I've got some different apple trees coming online. So some of that's just a matter of do what you can where you can. I mean, one of the things people talk about is growing potatoes in a bucket. And I've heard about that, and people say, oh yeah, it works really great. And I mean, even my mother-in-law, out of 1 5-gallon bucket, she gets like 5 pounds of potatoes. And then I don't know what she does, but it's never been working for me. So every year I try it again, and every year I get 3 tater tots. And so I'm not sure what I'm not doing right, but part of the idea is I want to do my learning curve now so that I can figure it out and I can get that 5 pounds of potatoes when I need it, rather than now I'm starving and I got 2 tater tots. So, I'm trying to do my learning curve now while failure isn't a big issue.
I remember early on with Prepper website, there was, people were doing just the buckets, potatoes in the buckets, but you would have this, like, you would do the slats, you would have this square and you'd build it up and you start it off and you keep throwing dirt on it or whatever you would do. And I remember this one video, they were like excited. They were going to open it up and they were going to get all this huge amount of potatoes. And there was nothing. There was like 2 potatoes out of everything. And they just kept going and going. And it was like, okay, we're going to, I'm sure we're going to hit it somewhere. We're going to hit the mother lode somewhere. And then nothing ever came. You felt bad, but it was also like all that time and money invested and it was nothing, And so completely agree. The whole buy a survival bucket of seeds. That's great but you got to learn how to do the hard stuff, do the gardening and have that knowledge, that experience from being able to do it. Not too long ago, I shared on the Top Prepper articles about doing a gardening planner. It was an article on having a gardening planner and keeping data and so you can reference, like, hey, I planted this here and this really paid off, or I planted this over there. I started, my seeds at this time, and just being able to go back, because you hope that you would remember those types of things, but then you wind up forgetting. Just life starts happening. So a lot of good stuff there as far as the food concerns. My thing, I have not been gardening for the last couple of seasons just because I've been so busy. But when it comes to food, when I started hearing the concerns, and I usually move sooner rather than later because of what you're hearing out there. But all the talk about we're going to feel it, we're going to feel the crunch. And I think this was more like right when we're in the middle of, our the last couple of years and all the things that were going on there. making more food buckets and making more, doing more 5-gallon buckets with the Mylar bags and all that kind of stuff, and making sure that we just had extra, kind of like what you said, Brian, because family's going to wind up coming over and you're not going to wind up turning them away. And so that you want to have a little bit of extra there. And I know other family members were doing the same thing. The thing is, like, when you're in an emergency situation, you think you always feel like you have enough until you don't. And I've felt that before in other things, and not necessarily food or even preparedness, but maybe it was time. Like, I had all this time. I look back and like, I had all this time to do this and I didn't do it. And now I regret it. I should have been doing it a little bit at a time. Maybe, like, I don't know, planting a tree or doing this or doing that or something in your career. And the same thing with food, right? Is like, if you're in an emergency situation, it's like, hey, I could have stockpiled more food. I could have had created more food buckets. I could have freeze dried more food. I could have done all this other stuff. And you shoulda, woulda, coulda, all that kind of stuff. And you wind up regretting. So if you're ever in a real survival situation, you start running low. I mean, you can kick yourself because you did not stock up more. But the truth of it is that there's only so much you can stock up. There's always the space situation, the cost of food, all that goes into it, the rotation and all of that. I think when we start having food concerns in, even though the production of food or how we're going to go about doing that, one of the things is, if you're one of those people that's thinking long term, like, hey, I feel like we could be in a crunch where we are going to be starving, right? A poop hit the fan situation. The question is, what is your plan? What is your plan other than going and buying more food and gardening? Do you have something beyond that? And for me, I've always talked about how I want to engage my community. And, if I know that having a garden myself is one thing, but getting other people to garden is another thing. And getting them all on board for whatever that might be. A lot of times people talk about connecting with, a farmer, somebody that's doing that and developing those relationships right now. That's great if they're really close by and you can get to them in walking distance or riding distance, whatever. But if you're having to get into a vehicle and drive 30 minutes, if you were in a true survival situation, that's not something that you want to consider. But what is your plan? How would you get through that? I think, Brian, you talked about having chickens, and I've had backyard chickens before, even here in the suburbs. And they were great. I loved having them. And it really did not take a lot of upkeep. And the minute that you start having the weird smell and stuff, you just throw more straw into the coop. And it's like you do the deep litter method. In my local Facebook group, our local neighborhood, there's been more than one persons that have brought it up. It's like, hey, can we have backyard chickens? And of course, everyone's like, yeah, we should have backyard chicken. And our lots are a little bit bigger, so we have a little bit more room. It's not like, small yards, and it would be okay. But you have the people like, no, it's against the rules and the HOA, and you have all that. My neighbor, the one that's just directly behind me, I noticed the other day that they have chickens. I think they're chickens. I'm not sure if they might be something else. You know how you can just see through the slats of the fence. I saw like 3 or 4. They're birds, some kind of birds, but they're not making any noise. And so I was pretty surprised about that, because mine would be a little noisy. So I don't know exactly what they are. I did hear them yesterday. I finally did hear one of them, and maybe they're just older, but they were just, roaming around the backyard. So I don't know what he all does. I don't want to be that nosy neighbor that looks over the fence or anything, but I think people are more accepting of it right now. If you can't do chickens, we've had backyard rabbits before, and that was a lot easier. They are not loud. They really don't smell a lot. And so having that might be something to consider if you're concerned about food production. I think one of the big deals is that community, being able to, hey, you're doing this, I'm doing that. You have fruit trees. I might have some rabbit meat that I can, trade off with you, or I have some vegetables, I have some potatoes, and going along those lines. So with that, I just kick it back. Brian, do you have anything to add to all of that after we kind of talked about that?
Well, I just wanted to bring it back around to the gardening. So you mentioned that you're in a suburb, and I'm in a similar to that, just out a little bit more. I guess you could call it rural. But anyway, so some people are maybe watching this in apartments or smaller homes and that type of thing. And I think you can still do some of these things. One of the podcasters, I don't remember who it was, talking about having quail in their garage. So if you have a garage, maybe you want to look into that. I know nothing about quail. But for the gardening, like Mick was saying, the potatoes in the bucket and stuff, you can do a lot of container gardening around your front porch, your patio, along your house line, your stuff like that. And it doesn't have to be in a container. You can do it right in the ground, as long as it's not going to throw it up underneath your, into your basement or whatever. I'm just saying, you don't want to put a maple tree there. And the, what is that? Cracky gardening you can do indoor, along with, every year I have a couple of those grow tents in the house for my starts. For my garden, I do a lot of my own starts, and you can also do stuff for your salads and your vegetables. As long as it doesn't get too out of control, like I wouldn't want to do a tomato plant or something in the house, but you probably could. With simple lighting, Cracky doesn't require any electricity other than lighting. If you have a good south-facing window, maybe that'd help. I'm just saying you can throw up some vertical gardening on your terrace, and probably if you're in an apartment, still get something going. Something's better than nothing, right? So, and like Mick said, it's all about learning what you can and cannot do before it's too late. And I did want to ask you about the rabbits. Is that those were for meat production, right?
Yeah.
So is that difficult to get through that part to where you can dispatch that animal and turn it into some meat?
I think it's a lot easier than chickens. I mean, if you're processing rabbits, it's a whole lot easier than chickens. And you can, there are some videos online when I was first learning to do it. I mean, because I learned by watching a video, on YouTube and going from there. There are some people that can do it in seconds. It's so fast. But yeah, if you can get past the sending it off to Never Land, you're good. And it wasn't too difficult at all.
And I know this is a little off topic here, but do you keep the fur and stuff? I mean, it just seems like rabbit fur might be worth learning how to do tanning or something, and having that is maybe even if to barter or something. Am I out of line with that? Or
I did not do that. I considered it just for the experience, but I did not wind up doing it.
Yeah, that's a whole other hobby to get into. Again, you have to figure out what you're going to do with it. I mean, the joke around here for a while, I had like 12 gray squirrel pelts from squirrels that I had decriminalized. And they were saying, well, what are you going to do with all these pelts? And I thought, well, I don't know, but I keep making them. So I was thinking I'd make myself a vest or something out of them so I could have my squirrel fur vest. I still haven't put them. They're still salted and down in the garage, but you would have to figure out what you're going to do with them.
And you need a hat, man. I'm thinking you're going to make a hat. Well,
I've got raccoon pelts for that. Squirrels have pretty short fur. That's why I figured I could make kind of a vest. It would have sort of stripes.
That's funny.
But I haven't made it yet because, like I said, that's a whole nother hobby that I haven't made time for.
And you know what? I think that's important. I mean, we can kind of jump into our real big next topic. because it's the time factor. I mean, I haven't been doing a lot of gardening this last couple of seasons because of time and the time factor that goes into it. And I've even tried, putting I had the water on a timer and made it, that was really easy to do. I've done that before, but it's just spending the time to do that. And you having rabbits and, all that takes time. And then you have family and you have other commitments. And so when we talk about sometimes we in the preparedness community, we're talking about all these different things, and people start thinking, oh my gosh, I got to do all these things to truly be prepared. And it's like, there's no way that you could possibly do it all. The people that are doing YouTube videos and it seems like they're doing it all. I mean, that's their life, right? I mean, they've got 100,000 subscribers plus, and that's their life. They make money off of that. And so I think that would be a good segue and move into the next thing, because as we're talking about preparedness, a lot of time, and I know that this was the case when I started Prepper website, and for many, many years, it was always that the eventual goal of anyone who truly want to be better prepared, you truly want to be more self-sufficient, self-reliant, that you would eventually move to a homestead. You would eventually move out of the city or out of the suburbs into a homestead, and then you would start doing all these things. And you would have, rabbits and goats and chickens and a big garden, and you would make all the food for all the animals and all the livestock, and you would be, you'd have a well, and you'd have all this stuff, and it would be Little House on the Prairie for you. And that pretty early on, I realized like that's just not possible for the majority of people. There are some things that have happened in society that have made it a little bit easier now, maybe with people who are working from home and internet service that's better out in in rural settings. And so you could maybe do a little bit, but people who try to do all of it, I know that, I mean, there's plenty of articles, plenty of videos out there of people who try to do all of it and just could not do it. They wound up giving up, selling the homestead, and moving back to the city. There was someone that I remember from, again, Prepper website days. She was called the Wannabe Homesteader. I believe her name was Stephanie. Her whole thing was she lived in the suburbs, and her goal was to get to a homestead. I don't know if they ever really did that or not, but they were trying homestead type things at home. So, if that was chickens, they'd have backyard chickens, but they wouldn't have like what a normal homestead would have. They'd have like 2 or 3 or maybe 5. There was always those types of things that she was winding up doing. And I think she was really popular. She had a really good blog, and her blog is gone. I wasn't able to find it. There's other people called Wannabe Homesteader. They have other pages out there that I noticed. Her videos are still up, and I actually clicked on it today. I wanted to go see if I could find it anywhere, if maybe she did get that homestead or not. Her last video was 4 years ago. But there are people that have that idea, like eventually that's what I want. And my thing is like, you can do some of the homesteading type things even if you don't get into a homestead. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that. If anybody is doing homesteading, in our little group, Mick, I know that you're a lot better suited to talk a little bit about that. But I wanted to kick it over to you about homesteading and kind of see where you're at with all that.
Well, I think you touched on an important point, that there is maybe it's a human failing to assume that if I'm going to do it, I have to do it 110% or not do it at all. And, like you say, you're more prone to burn out and fail than you are to succeed. But that would apply to anything. I mean, you might decide, well, I want to be a concert pianist in 6 weeks and really go for it, intensive training. And then you find out you're at the end of the 6 weeks. So there is a danger in thinking, maybe fear pushes people into that, of thinking that they've got to get it all done. They have to be living self-sufficiently on 40 acres by next year. And, that's just biting off way too much. That the I see the homesteading part as more of an attitude, like how do you approach things, and not to sound like I'm dissing anybody, but if you have the sort of city attitude of if I need it, I'll go to the store and buy it, is not homesteading, because there you're not really making anything. You're waiting for someone else to make it and you're just going to buy it, which is okay up to a point. And, I kind of hit that point, I don't know, 15 years ago or so, where, I had food stored, I had a water supply, I had alternate heat. And now with some solar, I've got alternate power. But there was always still that idea of, I'm not making any food. The food is going to run out eventually, whatever I've stored. And I recognized I'm not going to be able to be self-sufficient on the land I've got. Unfortunately, a lot of it is woods and the middle of it is swamp. So it's not like ideal Iowa farmland. So I'm not going to be that kind of a homestead, but it's that different attitude of, like with the chickens. I thought, well, it's hard to grow protein other than soybeans, I guess, but that's a thing that I thought, what am I going to do for protein? I can grow potatoes, I can grow corn, I can grow other stuff, but it's hard to grow meat. So I decided to get some chickens and, got into it kind of somewhat modestly at first to sort of learn my way around, and then realized, well, I'm still going to the store every spring to buy more baby chicks. So I thought, all right, maybe I got to get a rooster. Now I'm in an area where you can have a rooster, so it's not a big deal. And so now the flock is self-perpetuating, which is all fine, because then the chickens are on a rotational basis with a seniority, and then they graduate to the canning jars. That's a process. So now I'm producing some of my own protein. Now, could I live on that 100%? Probably not. But it's supplemental. Now, maybe I'm naive in thinking that the food system and the government are never going to completely go away, that the Mad Max style scenario is really pretty remote. But things could still get to where the government screws things up enough that food becomes either really expensive or items become scarce, or maybe just, well, that's sort of the government screwing things up. They may get enlightened green policies where they end up deciding that meat is evil, and so they're never going to sell meat. And even though there's ranchers out there growing cows, stores can't sell it, and so protein becomes a lot harder to come by. And if I don't want to eat the bugs, then what am I going to eat? So I thought, well, the homesteading attitude is more, can I make it myself? Maybe I can't make it all myself, but can I make some of it for myself? So sort of the similar vein would be planting the apple trees, that I'm growing my own fruit and I still have to can it. So it's still stored food, but I have to do the labor for it. But on the other hand, the difference is if Walmart doesn't have canned fruit anymore, I'm at least growing more and I'm still canning it to store it, but I'm now producing some of it. So I've been looking for other ways to produce. The Jerusalem artichokes is one that I haven't done yet. I think my son-in-law is into that. If it's a stored food or a perennial food, I like the perennial part, which is why I like the walking onions, because they're perennial onions. They're kind of small as far as onions go, but they're perennial. I don't have to keep doing that. I just have to thin the bunches every year. So I'm looking for, I'm lazy that way. I'd like perennial food that I can just go out and get. So yeah, homesteading is a little more of an attitude of doing it yourself rather than relying on the store. So you don't have to go whole Little House on the Prairie, especially not if it sort of goes way crazy with off-grid and you're trying to live off your rain barrels and solar panels and doing your laundry in the river on a rock and that sort of thing. I mean, you don't have to go crazy and still be homesteading. There, I'm done.
Good points. Good points. On the chickens, you said you started kind of slow. How many chickens did you start off with?
I started off with 6.
Okay.
And I've gotten up to more, but it starts to become kind of a crowding and a housing issue. I don't want to put up a chicken barn. So I've tended to keep the numbers a little on the smaller side. But, with the rooster, every year I end up with, especially now that I've got a broody hen, I have a I was going to call it a dehydrator, but it's not. Incubator. There we go. I've got an incubator and was using that to hatch them out. But now that I've got a broody hen or two, they hatch them, so I don't have to do much of anything. And so every year there's a half a dozen new chicks. Ideally, there's 2 or 3 to become the replacement hens to cycle out those that are going to graduate. And there's always more roosters than I want, so they become a meat source. So I started smaller. I'm not letting it get crazy, but obviously I could ramp up if I had to.
Cool. All right. Well, that's good. Brian, what about you? I know you have a little bit more property probably than I do. So what do you think about this homesteading aspect of it?
I probably don't. I'm only on a 1/4 acre lot and my house is on a good chunk of that. So I've got a decent size backyard, but it's not that. So I kind of look at it as like, couldn't really do a homestead in the traditional sense, but I can do homestead-esque. So I look at it like, just like Mick said, you don't have to go full board and, live, completely self-sustained to take advantage of some of the things. So we still do the gardening. I can't do the chickens, so I have a cricket farm and we eat crickets. Okay, so not really, but I guess you could. But yeah, I mean, we have solar power, but my solar power is 100 watts and it's limited to my recharge station. So power goes out, I still have phones recharged in without running a generator or an inverter. And just that one little section, one shelf on my rack, and I can charge it. Even outside lights I have attached to that. We do the canning, dehydrating, that type of thing. A lot of the homestead type of things where you can cook outdoors, but we don't, cook outdoor all the time, but we can. And with wood and propane and kerosene, so different alternatives for cooking. But of course we have a kitchen as well, so we're not gonna avoid that. So just those little bitty things as far as food storage, using Mylar bags, all the things that we see all over our prepper channels can be considered, I believe, as homestead-esque type things without having to go out and buy in, 130 acres in Utah somewhere, so.
Can you talk about, I wanted to go back to your freeze drying a little bit and share a little bit about how you got into that. I know freeze dryers are more expensive than a dehydrator. And so if you can talk a little bit about why you decided to go that route versus a dehydrator and all your experiences, if you could touch on that really quick.
Sure. I'm not an expert. I'm still learning at it. I didn't buy the freeze dryer new. I partnered with another prepper that had one, didn't have time. So we split the cost, split the food, that type of thing, and I do the work. So it just worked out well for me. As far as the time and amount, this is a large one, so it's probably a more expensive freeze dryer. I don't know exactly how much they are, but it's got the extra shelf, like five shelves in it, so I can get quite a bit of probably about as much food stored than I can, a day's canning session, or not a day, but like one canning session, like a 7-quart in a pressure cooker or something. But it does take longer. It takes like 3 days typically for me, because the timing is, I'm not good at the timing yet. So it's ready to come out right when I'm ready to go to work. So I let it run the rest, another 10 or 12 hours, just trying to wait until I have time to get to it. But that's also the good part of it. You don't have to sit there and every 90 minutes or 10 minutes and turn this and do all. It's a little bit easier than I believe until it comes time to putting it away and storing it. And we can store it vacuum packed Mylar bags or quart size jars and that type of thing. As far as whether it's worth it monetarily, I would, if I had to pay $4,000 to $6,000 for one of these, I probably wouldn't do it, to be honest, because it would take years, maybe beyond the life of the thing. I don't even know how long they last, but it would probably be very difficult to get your money back out of that. With that said, what I'm getting out of it, like we were talking about protein, I have pork and chicken and beef, and I have beef stroganoff and spaghetti and meatballs, all these completely prepared dishes that are freeze dried now, that, and you know, when we're ready to use it, all I need to do is rehydrate this and we have a whole meal, including the meat. That's something that you can't do with a dehydrator, and you can do it with canning, but not with noodles and that type of thing, but you can do it separately. I have the same meat canned. So I think it's a great alternative, but I don't know. But I think what's that you make that said it can't always be an economic decision. Sometimes we get to a point to where we want to go to the next step, and it's not necessarily going to be Dave Ramsey approved, right? It's what we want to get, and it's worth it to us to do that. With that said, if you're going to compare it apples to apples and compare it to the Hawkins Farms or the Legacy or anything like that of their freeze-dried number 10 cans, absolutely get the freeze dryer, because that's not going to take long at all because that stuff's very expensive. We're talking about that as well. But to have that long-term storage, I think it's a nice resource.
So Brian, we're at my church, we're doing the freeze drying as well. And we had found that some things were a real waste of time to bother freeze drying because they took a whole long time. Thinking of things like very juicy fruits like strawberries and peaches. I think they did. Apples weren't quite as bad, but like you say, you're waiting 3-4 days before the batch is done, and you could dehydrate them in a day. And the end result is not remarkably different. So for really watery things like fruits, freeze drying, it kind of doesn't pan out that well. Now, meats are another matter that you can, what I'd been doing is taking a bunch of chicken and cooking it up and then dicing it up into, little like roll the dice sized cubes. And that could be done in a couple of days because it's not as moisture intense. So, freeze-dried protein, that's kind of more worth doing, because with the Augustin Farms and other such things, freeze-dried meats are really pricey. So that's a way to bring it down. Now, at the church where we're doing it, we have the added benefit of a lady that comes to the church is also a manager at a grocery store, and she's arranged to take home the stuff they're going to throw away. And it's shocking how much they throw away. I mean, you really just don't think about it because it's always new and fresh on the shelves, but once it hits the day before expiration date, it's out in the dumpster. And she brought in one time like over 50 pounds of frozen chicken. And now they were all in those little clever blister packs. They weren't from the butcher shop section, but they were going to throw all that away. So we were able to save it, keep it frozen, but then cook it up and freeze dry it. So it's given us a reclaimed resource that would have been thrown away otherwise. But I kind of have to wonder, this is not exactly homesteading, because I don't think the Ingalls family had a Whole Foods next door that was throwing away food. But I have to imagine this one grocery store is not the shocking exception, that a lot of grocery stores are probably chucking a lot of stuff. And it's a matter of, it's out of your comfort zone to go and ask managers about that dispatching rotation that they do. Now, a lot of this stuff, well, even then, a lot of the produce and things, you look at it and go, yeah, I can see why you threw it away. Out of the quart of strawberries, I can see a moldy one. But we were even taking those and saying, all right, there's the moldy one. I'll throw that away, but I'm going to dice up and dehydrate the rest. So I've got pints and pints of dehydrated strawberries that was otherwise thrown away. But I have to wonder how many other people would have that free source of food to be canning from.
And you mentioned the the Laura Ingalls type of thing, or the Little House. We're modern day, so I think the ideology of storing the food is important. So if some people want to stay old school and pure and all that stuff and avoid anything that uses electricity, and I more power to them, but I'm going to use every resource that I have at my disposal right now, because I don't want to get 6 months into an event or something and say, wow, I really wish I would have used the electric can opener there, because now I'm cranking this and it's hurting my hand. I mean, you don't want to depend on a freeze dryer or a dehydrator or anything like that, but in the process of preparing for something, if it's available, take it. And I think it's an awesome idea to, not everybody can do the community thing like the church, and I'm sure that has a lot to do with why the stores are willing to give away stuff that they would generally throw away. But that's just kind of like what I'm doing with the freeze dryer and stuff. It's just you're working with somebody else to try to recover some of that. And as far as the freeze, I did want to mention the freeze dryer turned out to be amazing in my world, where every winter or every late fall, I'm always like, I've got all these herbs and stuff that I'm trying to figure out, what can I dry by hanging up? What do I need to dehydrate and all that? I've got freeze dried herbs of all sorts now, basil and rosemary and all this stuff that's going to last me all through till the next season because of the freeze dryer. And that really simplified things. And I've even got lettuce and stuff that's freeze dried. So I don't think that's going to work out very well, because it didn't want to, it didn't want to rehydrate very well. But then we've got, sorry, the phone's ringing. We've got the chicken patties. Hold on, I got a cough. Sorry, maybe you want to edit that. But we got what do you call it? Chicken breasts, and I cut those in half to make them freeze dry faster. And I made some chicken parmesan with I cut those chicken breasts in half too. But they also have cheese on top, and then I've got the sauce and the noodles. I did the noodles separate. Those took like 5 days to run through because they were so thick by the time I made. So that's something to consider too. I had a bunch of apples because we went to the apple orchard and picked apples and stuff. So I did all types of things with the apples. But as far as cost effective, that probably was not the perfect use for a freeze dryer, because it does take a lot of electricity. And this one here in particular has to have its own independent 20 amp circuit and stuff, because it's the larger one. And so it's using quite a bit of electricity. And then to run that thing, because apples are high in moisture, to run that thing for 3 days, and now you got a bag of freeze-dried apple chips. Was that really worth your time and money? So, but yeah, I agree with the meat is probably the best bang for your buck when it comes to something like that, because you can't freeze dry. I mean, you can't dehydrate meat. You can but you can't dehydrate it. So I think, and like Mick said, those number 10 cans of like what do they call it? The crumbles, the beef crumbles or the chicken little chicken cubes or whatever they are. We're looking at maybe $100 for a number 10 can of that. So that's cost effective there.
Yeah, we had kind of decided that when it came to preserving chicken in particular, I mean, the free chicken is one thing, but even then, we can pressure can 7 quarts of it overnight, and we're done, and it's overnight. And we can run that much through the freeze dryer, and we have some, and I still end up with quarts of basically cooked chicken meat. It's just one of them is wet in the quart jar, and the other one is dry in the quart jar. So at some point, I don't know that it's that cost effective. I do like the fact that it's dry, but it's still in a quart jar. So I'm not sure how much that matters. I like the quart jars just because they're mouse proof, as opposed to the Mylar bags. I have to put those in something else to be mouse proof, but it's, canning or freeze drying the meat. That's kind of a bigger deal for food storage because it's a lot harder to come up with that. If the government's going to be giving you your bag of rice a week, well, you got your starches, but proteins are harder to come by.
There's one more thing I wanted to bring up on the Mylar bags, because I've been using Mylar bags and oxygen O2 absorbers for years, and I never realized how often, until I started doing them every week, how often one will suck up and show, it looks completely perfectly molded, and the next one looks like it's got air in it. And I kept thinking, wow, so I went and bought larger or thicker mill bags, more expensive Mylar bags, and then larger O2 absorbers, thinking that was going to fix it. And half of them would be shrunk down, half of them wouldn't. Well, with some research and a lot of trial and error, a lot of those, because nitrogen and O2 is taking the oxygen, so they're still leaving the nitrogen in the bag. So depending, I don't know, maybe on what the percentage is at the time in the bag, I don't know what the difference is. Sometimes a Mylar bag won't shrink down to where it looks all nice and perfect and complete all the air removed out of it, because it's not removing the air, just the oxygen, right? Just leaving the nitrogen. So that's a little bit tougher, because it's like, is all the oxygen gone, or is there a little pinhole in there that I'm not aware of? So it's not a perfect solution.
Before you, if you're talking about 5-gallon buckets, before you put the top on and you put it in your closet or wherever you're going to put it, do you let it sit overnight? Usually,
well, this isn't in 5-gallon buckets. This is just we're filling up these gallon Mylar bags with the O2, sealing it, and then putting them in the large, what is it, like 27-gallon totes or something.
Okay.
And storing them in there, in those, or at least till we transport them where they go.
Okay.
But Todd's point was, do you wait a little while to see if they puff out, or do they end up being puffy kind of right away?
Oh, no. I mean, it takes, you look at it the next day, you do it at night, and the next morning look at it, and half of them will be shrunk way down, and half of them look like they'd still got a little bit of air in them.
Mm. Yeah. Do you do like Frank said and write the weight on there and then reweigh it to see if it's actually taken on moisture?
Yeah, I always write the gross weight. So after everything's in there, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. And everything's in grams, right? So I'm weighing everything in grams. So if it weighs 335 grams, when it's all sealed and done, and the O2 absorbers, the gross weight of the package, and weigh it, then you put it away. And 2 months later, if it's 345 grams, you just added 10 grams of moisture more than likely in that bag. So that's a way to make sure you look at the weight, weigh it, and if it's the same weight, you're probably safe. It probably didn't add, with a pinhole or something and moisture inside that container. Although it seems like a lot of that stuff you would probably see the moisture anyway, but to be on the safe side.
Sounds good. Good stuff, guys. I wanted to talk to Mick. I wanted Mick to talk a little bit about the processing of the pig and how all that went. I think, though, let's save that because we have another one scheduled, right? We'll get together and we're going to do another one. Let's save that one. And I think we can really do a longer conversation about that. I think that piece will be important. But before we end this one, any other things that just come up that's just, you want to be able to tackle here on this one? Nick, is there anything? Well, I'll kick it to Brian. Brian's ready to go. Go ahead, Brian.
Like I said, Brian never says the least. Without getting into this long political discussion and stuff, one of us had brought up the idea that, and I don't remember, was that you, Mick, where by now we're supposed to be in a collapsed economy. There's one blogger that kills the economy every week or month or whatever, and by now we should be like in our foxholes and stuff. But even just yesterday I was listening to a podcast with more economic experts talking about in 2023 we're probably already in a recession. It's going to get worse, but we are seeing a lot of layoffs and all that stuff, especially with the tech and stuff. I don't think it's time to panic. I mean, like, you probably wouldn't want, if you're investing in your 401k or something, or, you probably don't want to invest in tech right now. Like, I don't want to name any names, but, a lot of them's laying off and that type of thing. That doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be no food on the shelves, but we just witnessed over the last 2.5, 3 years that food can and more likely will get harder to find. I don't think we're going to necessarily be, in a bread line anytime soon, or probably not even in our lifetime. So I don't want everybody just think. I think the worst thing anybody that's just now watching and considering prepping can do right now is think it's too late. It's not too late. Just buy a couple extra cans of food every now and then when you go to the store and start building it up, and you'll be amazed at how quickly this stuff adds up, and you just keep adding to it. I don't want everybody to think, well, I should have did this 5 years ago and now it's just too late for me. It's not. I just a lot of doom and despair and stuff on our blogs and stuff, because that, in the videos, because that's set up. We're going to be fine, but you're going to be way better off if you just prepare a little bit.
Good point. Mick, any last parting thoughts?
Following up on what Brian said, that I guess I'd add the avoiding, for people to avoid that notion that they have to go completely Laura Ingalls, or there's no point doing anything. So it's either I'm going total off-grid homestead, washing river rocks, or I continue in my own life. I don't think it's an either or. That instead, I would encourage the backyard gardening, the container gardening, the whatever. Do the learning curve now. So when you need those potatoes, you know how to do the potatoes. But seeing it more as adding resilience rather than complete self-sufficiency. If you can grow. What was that Nicole had mentioned on that Zoom meetup, so that she was growing 20% of their family's food? Well, that's doing actually quite a bit. But if you can grow anything and can anything, then you've added some resilience, that you're not completely dependent on the system like you're on life support. But instead, you've added a little resilience, and from that, you can add a little bit more resilience. So it's like Brian said, it's never too late to start. And you don't have to go whole hog. You can just work in increments.
Good points. There's not a lot more that I would add to all of that. I think I do not like when people say it's too late to prep. I don't ever think that's the case. People who would have thought that 2 or 3 years ago I mean, and they didn't prep. It'd be crazy to think of, you know, all that time that was spent that you wind up regretting. The fact is that a lot of people already do prep. When you think about, like, here in where I live, hurricane, you know, people know what to do for a hurricane. Up north, people know what to do for a winter storm or a blizzard. So you just add a little bit more to that, and you're starting to really get better prepared, you know. So there's always more that we can talk about that, and we can go into, you know, long discussions about that. But that's basically it. It's not difficult, and it makes a whole lot of sense, especially in the times that we're living in. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and end it there. Thanks so much for taking time to hang out with me and talk a little bit about disaster food and homesteading. It's always great to talk with you guys.
All right. Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.